you have a list? You have an ordered list of who's getting introduced? Okay, from left to right.
I got promoted.
Alright, so we know how we're going to do this.
Yes. Okay.
And I want this story.
Okay.
We don't start.
Yeah, I'll just want to go first as the moderator.
So we're starting the Wednesday after the
We're going to be talking to them.
It's usually the Wednesday after the first one is so they start on the 5th.
No, no,
But then they're out usually by the end of May.
Yeah, so we're done last Wednesday.
Okay. Okay. Just get there.
Okay, yeah, they finished last Wednesday.
It just doesn't fly.
Whoa, are we live? Yeah, we're live right now. It's LitRPG podcast. LitRPG podcast. Perfect. Okay. Very strong.
10 out of 10 hardcore.
Charles, don't worry, just imagine them all in their own ways. Especially Nick.
There's no imagination needed.
I'm so loud. You guys are so loud. Above all, if you're gonna whisper, do it into the live mic. That's an important component. You're supposed to get the essence out of the music and stall.
And wait.
What are you pointing at me for? Is it ready to go? Yes. Are we sound testing? Oh, it's time to go.
Looks like we're all starting, ladies and gentlemen.
We're starting a little bit early, but it's okay.
Okay,
We have a movie.
are also live streaming this for everybody on Facebook through the LitRPG Podcast Facebook page. So say hello to everybody on the internet.
We're not live.
Well, no, I'm live online. Okay. I'm just saying hello to everybody is all. That's all.
You'll mostly live. Watch
What's that?
Panic.
I don't know. Did we start?
Do what?
I'm confused. Okay, I think she was confused because you said that you were streaming from
Oh, yeah.
your phone.
Yeah,
They're just recording.
Yeah. Okay,
This is really great.
I know.
Really great video.
content.
Scintillating.
We're professionals, I promise.
All right. Kick it off, Mr. Ramon.
Okay, so everyone, thanks for joining us at the LitRPG and GameLit panel here. We're good. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm the host of the LitRPG podcast, and I'm going to be the moderator for our wonderful panel of guests. With me are a group of panelists that comprise some of the top talent in our particular genre. Together, we'll be talking about the GameLit and LitRPG, what the difference is between them. There is a difference. Unique cultures to our subgenre, why it's popular at all, and the unique challenges to the genre from both the perspective of authors, we have quite a few of them, but also narrators and audiobook readers and speakers and other people. We'll be taking live questions from both the audience and the last 15 minutes of the panel. So please hold your questions till then. And when you have your questions, we'll have you come up to the mics to ask them. If you have any, we'll also be taking questions from our live audience if we happen to get any. But until then, we are going to get started. But let me introduce to you our wonderful panel here. I'm going to start off with myself. I'm Ramon Mejia. I am, again, the host of the LitRPG podcast. read and reviewed over 900 LitRPG titles and reviewed them. Made a gigantic database of them for people to enjoy and to love. I'm also an author as well, so I write the genre. But more importantly, our panel hosts are wonderful people as well. Starting on this side of the table.
1 second, Ramon, they're gonna play a clip from your.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah.
Play a clip.
Uh-oh, maybe that.
No?
I think they have they have a brand new puppy underneath that desk, so maybe we should just keep going.
We're keep going then. Okay. Then we're going to start in the introduction with David Wilmarther, who's to my immediate left, but your guess is right. He's known as the grumpy old man of GameLit. David has written LitRPG novels specifically since 2017 with his series The Greystone Chronicles. It did incredibly well, and he went on to write 9 other books, including 2 of the series, the Shadow Sun Survival series and the Dark Elf Chronicles. He has audiobooks for all but the most recently published novels. Next to him is Charles Dean. He's also known as the Bearded One in our particular community. Charles Dean has written LitRPG novels since 2015, which may not seem like a really long time ago, but for this particular genre, it's one of the earliest examples of LitRPG in the American marketplace. He's written 10 novels and has audiobooks for most of them. The Bathrobe Night was his first LitRPG series, which I mistakenly reviewed as the Bathroom Night. He emailed me and he corrected me, and we accidentally wrote some Super Mario fan fiction at the same time. And ever since, we've been friends. He's gone on to create several other LitRPG stories and series that are massively popular, including War Eternus, Merchant of Tickball, and his newest series, The Heroic Villain. Additionally, he's the host of the Drinking with Charles series on YouTube, where he drinks and he jokes and he talks to authors and other people he finds interesting. So thank you, Charles. Next to him is Dakota Kraut. He's an author in his own right, but he's also a businessman. He actually owns and runs Mountain Dale Press with his wonderful wife. Dakota is a best-selling author of the Divine Dungeon series and the Completionist Chronicles. And a number of his novels have done so well, they've actually hit the top 100 on Amazon a number of times, including his latest novel, which hit number 12 on all of Amazon. Not just in a category, the overall, and that's an amazing comic. That's how popular his stuff is. Again, with his wife, he founded Mountain Publishing, and his goal is kind of just to help other authors do as well, which is a very laudable goal, but also profitable for everybody, hopefully. There we go. And next to him is, who's next? Harmon Cooper. Sorry, but couldn't see him. Harmon Cooper. Harmon Cooper wrote his own introduction because I forgot. He's known as the Merry Fixture of GameLit, founder of the Venus Vanity Press in the Northeast, Boycott Books. He's the author of over 27 GameLit novels, including Feedback Loop series, Fantasy Online series, The Last Warrior of Ungaia, which is probably correct. Yeah, I could never say that correctly. He's corrected me many times. Cherry Blossom Girls, House of Dolls, Monster Hunter NYC, We Could Be Heroes, and the forthcoming Child of Chaos. Darn it, Carmen, slow down your writing. Slow down. Yes. Next to him is, who's next? Yeah, Jeff Hayes. Jeff Hayes is the narrator and owner of Sound Theater. Jeff is the go-to guy in the genre for audiobook narration and lends his voice to over 145 audiobooks, which is a massive amount for anybody. He owns and operates the indie audiobook production company Sound Theater and has hosted over 130 live recordings on his YouTube channel, Sound Theater Live. And you're actually going to notice a common theme with a lot of people in the genre that they have a very heavy social media presence, and we'll talk about that in our questions, why that is important. And last but not least, we have the wonderful Andrea Parsnow. Award-winning, yes. Andrea is an IA award-winning narrator and has published over 300 hours of audiobook narration, most of which are LitRPG or GameLit. She's considered one of the best narrators in the genre and has a rabid following of listeners. She also does a live broadcast of her production work on Discord for fans and supporters. And you're going to see that is a comment. So that's everybody on the panel. I didn't miss anybody, did I?
No,
excellent.
That's everybody. And I think, can we do the, we'll just go down the row and play little clips of everybody real quick?
As it blows, I feel a natural shrinkage. I lower ahead of me. It tells me I'm naked. My hands instinctively move to the
Ready,
top of my hand, but from a chill breeze.
Here we go.
As I wonder where all my clothes have gone, A soft, feminine voice with... Speaking of the wind, as it blows, I feel a natural shrinkage from my lower anatomy that tells me I'm naked. My hands instinctively move to protect my manhood from the chill breeze. As I wonder where all my clothes have gone, a soft, feminine voice whispers near my ear,
"Morning, sleepyhead. Welcome to Terra."
The sound of another person so close to me sends a jolt of adrenaline through my body, and I sit up, frantically looking for the person that spoke. While thoughts of drunk-dialing former crushes pass through my mind, I hear a light-hearted giggling. I hear a tone of pity as the voice says,
"Up here, Armand."
Now, having a clear direction to reference, I look up and see the most fantastic sight. There, hovering about 3 feet above my head, is a woman, no bigger than my hand, with jet black hair and smooth alabaster skin. This tiny woman flies through the air with 4 translucent wings and is wearing a dress that seems to be made out of leaves. I've never been the most eloquent of speakers, especially when talking to women, so it's not really a surprise when seeing the small, beautiful flying woman. All I could think of to say was, "What the hell?"
Anybody out there?
Yes.
Anybody alive?
All right.
The contamination is...
This is Dave Wilmarth's Plan of the Undying. Oh no, this is book 2, sorry.
Anybody out there? Anybody alive? The contamination had spread through Europe first with almost no warning. The military forces of the various nations had tried to respond and contain, but the spread had been much too fast, and the best option seemed to be to kill everything in hopes of stopping the spread. But of course, it all failed, and the code took notice.
It began at that location, Mace. The target has now moved in the direction of this building.
Headshot, but it's still moving. Went underneath the tree, hasn't come out. Maybe it's dead?
Her voice was instinctually quiet from her time spent outside. Silence was survival.
So damn many ways to die out here, and we go and create a new one.
And the code watched and learned. There was a few of us in the first days, but they've all dropped away.
I'm sorry. I know what it's like to be alone.
I'm not sure how much longer I might have lasted. Ever play a game called Elysia? You mentioned facilities in Hong Kong and Sydney. Are they facilities like this one? Underground? With a power source? 5 years should be more than we need. Has Peabody informed you of my plan to upload our consciousnesses permanently? The Elysia servers are still up. If things go as planned, we'll be abandoning our bodies soon anyway. Thank you, Mace and Sherry, for reaching out.
I can't wait to meet you in the game.
And the code watched and learned.
Something's changed, everybody.
Even after his death, the first man's lessons continued on.
There is nothing depraved about sleeping with plenty of women, drinking tons of liquor, and enjoying all the finer points in life.
But his teachings did not perish with him. So, do we kill one of them for show? Make sure they know what's what? The teachings branched out and covered the first man's descendants in a blessed shade.
Well, you heard the deities. We need to press on and kill a bunch of people.
And so they made their own son.
I introduced him to one of my buddies, and Brian showed him how to handle a sword.
Except Brian was a zombie, building fires out of lies to illuminate themselves with their own nature.
And the next thing I knew, I was in this fantasy world where she was explaining me how to fight, showing me some cool moves, teaching me how to use my inventory.
Society then progressed with men fighting over possession in absence of necessity. It knows how to make wooden spears, iron spears, steel spears, 30 different grips, and multiple different methods of decoration. On the beasts that appeared in the shadows cast by lies instead of the real game.
The NPCs? Nah, they're fine. They can be concubine 1 and 2. In fact, we can get you 10 concubines if you want.
That walked in the sun outside of the shade.
It's kind of a long and a short story.
We have Mithria to hunt.
And this is what's Mithria.
You seriously have no idea what a monster hunter is?
I mean, I just installed the app like an hour ago.
Why would you install something without knowing what it is?
Look, I had a pretty bad day.
How bad? Want to talk about it for Alpha Baby?
Dark Mocking me?
A little.
I just did what Iris said. I lay down on my bed, put on my visor, and installed the app.
And you didn't research anything about it. Mithria are what we capture here in your world. It is why we have rendered our services to you. We capture, you place him in your dojo, you train, we all prosper. You are our alpha and we are your huntresses. Need I explain more?
Is that a bear? Don't kill it!
It is not our job to kill the baby beardillo, unless it gets out of hand.
It doesn't seem like it will get out of hand.
It will once its mother comes.
Speaking of the wind, as it blows,
Voiced a disconcerting amount of
I feel a natural shrinking.
Amari is an interest.
That was perfect. Okay, so yeah, that's all the clips. Sorry there.
Approach for those wonderful samples from our panelists, so thank you. Some questions about what genre is, and some challenges. We're going to begin with the really big question that everybody's probably anxious to know. What is LitRPG? What is GameLit? And we're going to start, we're basically just answers for everybody in the panel. We'll always start with it. Dave, we'll want to work our way down the table. So, Dave, what is LitRPG to you? What is GameLit?
Start with me because I've done quite a bit of arguing with people about this publicly. LitRPG books are sort of the crunchier books in the LitRPG versus GameLit category there. The requirement is that the characters improve their skills, level up, gain experience in a measurable manner, meaning they get experience for killing things, they level up. Leveling up gives them more abilities or the chance to increase their skills, chance to learn new skills, and there's a sort of a clear progression through the story. Somebody disagrees already. Through the story that sort of is a measurable and visible component.
Thank you very much. Next, Charles Dean, what's LitRPG and GameLit to you?
So LitRPG, I guess I'm going to agree with Dave about the measurable part. I don't necessarily need to have the progression, but for me, a lot of fantasy pre-LitRPG was built around like, oh, this guy's emotions went up, so all of a sudden the world is changing for this stuff. Whereas LitRPG takes it and they use kind of like, whether it's a D&D system, a self-made system, a existing video game system or something, they create clear and concise boundaries of how the world operates in a magical fantasy. So you still, I guess it's like trackable, quantifiable magic physics is, I guess, the way I would put it. So you don't just have things kind of like work all honky wonky all over the place, and that's what LitRPG is to me, and that's kind of why I love it, because it doesn't have as much randomness.
Yes, the non-randomness is not a very big part of like the genre's appeal. That it doesn't feel willy-nilly. There are actual rules to this world, and they are on in real life. So that's kind of appealing for a lot of readers. Next, Cody Crouch. What's LitRPG versus GameLit for you?
So GameLit, what I see GameLit as is mostly, a world that could be our world, could be going to someone else's world, where we have game-like characteristics, right? You have your strength, like you have everything that you have is measurable, quantifiable, and it leaves behind a reason for why it works the way it does. So if say you have, like you said, D&D stats. If you put an extra point into strength, if you lift 10 extra pounds, can you hit with 100 newtons more force? It's something that it removes the hand waving from fantasy. So we are fantasy writers, or science fiction writers, a lot of us. But we just do it in a way that you, the audience, the reader, can see why we're doing it the way we're doing it.
That's a really point that the audience is other gamers. They're people who play hundreds of hours of RPG games, maybe do tabletop gaming, maybe the gym masters, and so they actually know math and they know mechanics and they play mechanics, and they will actually look and appreciate the work that GameLit and LitRPG authors do in creating these actual visible rules for their worlds. Next up is Harmon. So what's GameLit and LitRPG for you, man?
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. It's really interesting being at an audiobook festival and a narration festival because when they play stuff, everyone's just like this. And it looks real strange from the stage. It's like a transcendental meditation. I would never sit on a stage at that, obviously. But it's really cool to be here. GameLit is a metaphor, in my opinion, for life. Everything that we've done and are continuing to do and will do until we die is based on some sort of leveling up. If it's, I'm investing in the stock market, or I am moving up at a job, or I am, getting my first mortgage. So it's just for me, and the way I write my books, it's just a metaphor for life. I'm a science fantasy writer, and I of course grew up playing video games, but I always stick with the metaphor. Like the whole point of our existence is to move towards something, right? We're all moving towards something. We don't know what that is, but we acquire skills in the process of moving towards that. So that's what it is to me.
Thank you very much, man. To Jeff Davies.
Yeah, so from my perspective, coming into, I started narrating urban fantasy, sci-fi, a lot of different fiction. I was doing a ton of everything. And when I found GameLit and LitRPG, it spoke to me in a very specific way. I think that fantasy in general for authors is just that. It's like an escapism for themselves, and successful authors happen to have fantasies that everybody else escapes, that everybody else is into. And it seems like authors in this genre escape into video games, probably more than anything else, and that's why it colors their work so much. I don't really see too many dissimilarities between GameLit or LitRPG and other genres, just except for that, I guess in game terms, skin, right, of just having those stats available. It's fun to see the cultural lens that we have all grown up with. I grew up with video games, so often I will see leveling up happen in front of me, just as a matter of how I see the world. It's a filter, and GameLit is fiction experienced through that filter.
Okay, thank you very much. I actually I agree with your comparison between GameLit, LitRPG, and fantasy and science fiction. Like fantasy, magic systems about very clear rules, and for some readers or listeners, those clear rules make it more approachable, more understandable. Same thing with science fiction. Like science fiction generally, you have to have science in there, and science has rules and formulas and quantifiable subjects. And GameLit and LitRPG are very similar, except that their rules are based on RPG game mechanics that are relatable to the readers, which is why it's approachable and it connects with them. Thank you. Andrew? Arsenal?
Hi. What is LitRPG? LitRPG is the last kiss of light on morning dew. No, LitRPG is so incredibly unique. It's basically just gamification of life. It's the embodiment of, you could break your life down into a fantasy story into its most basic components, and then write those components and advance those components individually. It's kind of what it is. I don't want to overexplain. It's been explained. I don't have that much of a different take on it. It's just a really unique place, and for narrators, it's a unique place to play because it's that really interesting place between the crazy fun of video game video and over the topness of it, and more traditional fantasy and realism. So you can have goblins and also really super serious space marines.
Oh yeah, and especially since we're gamers too, we've experienced all these NPCs they're writing about, so we already know what they sound like.
Yep.
So we just mimic that, and our job's done for us.
Right, I think that's an interesting point as well, that as gamers, you bring a very interesting perspective to the audiobook narration, and that you can bring those experiences, like, oh, that's what an NPC sounds like, that's what the text dialogue sounds like, this is what the pacing for this super action scene should be like, according to your experience playing video games.
That's something interesting. I was talking to Jeff about that. There's an interesting component of being a gamer in the genre because you know that subtle difference between skill achieved, cooking, and skill achieved, cooking. You know, it's that slight difference in what you would hear in that game that makes it just that more, saleable that, oh yeah, this is game cool. You know, versus just something being read to you. So,
Just out of curiosity, besides the first 2 rows here, how many gamers are there here in the room? Almost everybody. That's awesome. Come on, guys.
It's a very interesting cultural perspective in that a lot of people who are our age grew up gaming, and that wasn't the case necessarily, 20 and 30 years ago. So culturally, we're all very much connected to this gaming kind of culture. Okay, next question. What drew you to this genre? Why did you start writing it? Why did you start audio narrating it? What drew you to doing this kind of work? Are you going to start with Dave or Mark?
Go first again, okay. I actually found LitRPG by accident. It showed up as an also bought in the back when I first bought my Kindle and started reading books, and it showed up, and I thought the cover was cool, so I started reading it, and I was like, man, I've been a gamer since Pong, since the 70s when the first games came out, so you name it, I played it, and suddenly here's this book, this fantasy book with game elements that I've loved all my life, and I started burning through them. I read something like 300 LitRPG books in the first year, and then I started talking to some of the authors in the Facebook groups and stuff, and I was like, man, if these guys can do this, I can do this. I always wanted to be a writer, so let me take a shot, and a lot of the writers in the group were very helpful, and they answered questions because I had no clue what I was doing, and they helped me along, and yeah, I just stumbled into it by mistake and read it like crazy, and it was like a dream come true for me.
Yeah, and it's always surprising to me how many successful LitRPG authors are first-time writers just because they're fans of what they're reading, and that kind of shows the creativeness of what gamers can do. Charles E.
When I started writing LitRPG, the reason I got into it was because there wasn't an American version for me to read. There were no English versions, so I was reading Korean translated versions called Legendary Moonlight Sculptor was my first one, which if you're a LitRPG fan, you've probably run into that before the American market picked up. And I remember loving the idea that the skills and all that stuff were structured, but as the series progressed, I got very frustrated that it went back to standard fantasy, hand-waving, logic was once more removed, physics were much more removed in the sense of magic physics, and so I was like, I kind of want to make a game where I can reinstill these concepts and do it in a way I like. And so I spent a lot of time designing that, and then I was like, well, I guess I could just write a small story around it, and that's how the Bathroom Night started.
Yeah, and for a lot of authors, it's the same kind of story of we were influenced by the stuff that came before us, and this genre was not unique to the United States or America at all. It started out in Asian countries like China, Japan, Korea.
Korea was the big one.
Yeah,
in Japan, if you're a LitRPG person, you've probably seen Sword Art Online. It was one of the more popular ones. But before that, as early as 1990, there was a ton of Japanese and Korean games.
Yeah, novels, and that translate to English or anime, and then popular culturally in Russia, it popped up there before us, and then from Russia it came to us. I think that translated in English. So yeah, we have a lot of similar experiences with that origination. Dakota Crouch, how did you get into GameLit LitRPG?
Sure. So actually, the person who pulled me into writing LitRPG is Ramon. So thank you, buddy. So the first book I ever wrote was Dungeonborn, and I wrote that because I had been playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends for so long. And then I lived in a college town, so as well started to graduate or take different courses, we kind of drifted. So I started out writing campaigns. I started writing a campaign that I was going to run, because as the dungeon master, it was my job to kill them in new and interesting ways. And so, that's what I was going for. I wrote from the perspective of the dungeon, luring in the adventurers with gold and loot and fun things. All in an attempt to have them touch the doorknob with 50,000 bolts. And it turns out that that's called writing a book when you do the whole campaign by yourself. My wife can attest. I finished writing and I said, I'm going to publish this. And I did. And from there, I went back and I edited it. And then from there, just more books, and thanks to Ramon, actually, it caught on right away. Into the market, he said, "Hey, I read this book. I liked it. It was pretty good. He's new, but he'll get there." And so Danielle pointed that out to me. She said, "Hey, this guy's pretty nice. You should keep writing." So I did, and now here we are.
Now he has an empire. Yeah. Mountain Press. So to go ahead, being very modest about his success. Like his first book, I have this panel at this convention for him. I heard him say that he credits me at all with his success, which is totally not true. He wouldn't have been successful without me. I just told people about on the podcast, this is a great book, you should all read it. And they all decided to listen to me, and he had wildly my book, but he's worked super hard on capitalizing on that popularity. He's written a number of books, number of series, and they've all gone on to be like super successful. Like his pre-order numbers for his novels are as popular or as good as most authors wish their full releases were. So he's worked really hard to do a lot of work, including expanding into publishing, which is a step that not everybody's going to do in helping other authors and other creatives bring their stories to life and doing all the hard work, marketing and editing. And then do really favorable contracts, and then he's been super generous with the community as well. But he touched on an interesting point, I think, in that his creative storytelling comes from his experience as a dungeon master, as a tabletop gamer, and that's also going to be a common thing in our genre from creatives right underwater with narrators, that they have their storytelling chops from being dungeon masters, which is what you are. You're creating entire story worlds with RPG mechanics and rules. And you're creating adventures for your character, for your players. And like he said, it's kind of doing that as an author. It's just that he's the only player now. And then that's something you'll see very common in our particular genre. So thank you, man. Harmony Cooper, what drew you to this genre?
So I first published in 2011, and then I fell off for a while because I moved to Asia, and I started a book publishing company there. And during that time, I was transitioning between Japan and Mongolia. And I had to come back to Mongolia, and I was working for a publisher, and they weren't really taking my advice when it came to marketing books, even though they were paying me to research marketing books. And so at the time, I was watching anime that my brother recommended to me, Sword Art Online. A person had given me a legal, I guess, what is it, a borrowed copy of Ready Player One in like 2012, and I had never read it, so I was like, I'll read it then. I had just read Amon Rye by Charles Bukowski, and I'm a big fan of the movie Groundhog Day. And then all that congealed into the feedback loop, which I wrote in March 2015, and Jeff narrated in 2016. I didn't actually join the community until 2016, and mostly because of Travis Bagwell. If it wasn't for him, I would not be in this community. Well, maybe, but most people who read LitRPG know who Travis Bagwell is, and his book, Awaken Online, and I read it, and I saw that he was from Austin, Texas, and I'm from Austin, Texas, so I emailed him like, hey, I'm from Austin, Texas, and I write these types of books too, and then he's the one who introduced me to everyone. Like, hey, I'm introducing Harmony Cooper to this exclusive group of just like 10 authors who are in like one little Facebook group together. So that's like part of how I got into it, and with the community. Regarding actual LitRPG versus GameLit, my first series would be classified as GameLit because I was completely doing this on my own, and I had no idea what LitRPG was. Had I known what LitRPG was, then Feedback Loop might have had more of those elements. However, all on my own, by the time I got into the LitRPG community, I was on book 4 of the Feedback Loop, and I had already done the third book, which actually had he's transported to a world where it's a turn-based system, like a JRPG. And so I had already done all these things that now people were doing. There's just a book released yesterday, Bastards, which is that very much the turn-based type thing, right? And that idea, and that's what I grew up on. So that's how I got into it, and I've just kind of gone from there. I've done more LitRPG from that point forward, and I've kind of transitioned back to GameLit because as I started as mostly just wanting to be a storyteller, and sometimes the mechanics can get in the way of actually telling a good story. So, and all the authors up here know there's always a balance because you're always balancing to work with tense and work with tension, and then working with putting the elements that those people like in, and then also moving the story forward in a way that's not just 30 pages of stats, which can happen sometimes. And that's how I got into it, and it all started on a whim and all kind of a protest because the British publishers were not listening to me, and they were my partners, and I want to just publish my own thing and not pay attention to what they want me to do. And that's what started.
Thank you very much. Jeff Hayes, how did you get into LitRPG GameLit? Everybody.
So my first LitRPG was Other Life Dreams by William D. Arendt. At that time, I was cruising ACX.com. I don't know how many of you know ACX. Any of you narrators out there, if you know ACX, you know that it is not easy to make money on royalty share stuff. But that back then, they used to have this the system called the stipend, where they would give you if an author put up their book on ACX and it looked like it did well according to their algorithmic gnomes, then they would give a narrator a bonus of $100 per finished hour from their own coffers, not from the authors, to do a royalty share for that book. So Other Life Dreams turned out to be one of them. I was like, maybe it'll work, and it blew up. And then that turned me on to the fact that there's this whole community of people who are absolutely ravenous. Just all the LitRPG they can possibly get, all the time, obsessed with it, constantly talking about it in their Facebook groups, and very, very supportive of each other. I mean, the writers are the same as the readers in this community. I mean, everyone just loves the genre, and it inspires everybody to create. And that's the kind of environment that I thrive in, like supporting people in their endeavors, trying to, move forward in their lives. I mean, all of you narrators out there know that when you're just first starting off, it's really hard to find a catch. It's really hard to find your path, your particular place as a narrator. And back then, I was just making enough money to live. I mean, it's funny to me that a lot of these authors are like, well, I think I'm making enough money now on being an author to quit my day job. This was always my day job. Ever since I started, I was like, let's hope this does well, and I just put my face to the grindstone. So GameLit, as soon as I found out that there is this giant pool of authors and readers who don't have audio, and who are writing all these crazy characters and giving me opportunities to feel like I'm doing voices for a video game, which is something I've always wanted to do anyway. I just jumped on it. Right after Other Life Dreams, I just kind of threw out a net. It's like, who's next? And Harmon was one of them. Dave and Charles came much later. Let's see, who else? Who else was at the beginning? Blaze Corvin, one of the biggest GameLit names out there. Jake Bible. I mean, there's so many I can't even count now. I can't even remember them all. But it's just been such a blast, not just making the good money, but having a great community to hang out with. Everyone feels like my friends, not just the authors, but the listeners. Being in the Facebook group with them, and being able to talk video games and just play around with the community and feel in touch with the people that are supporting me. So that's what really drew me to GameLit, I think, is the community.
Okay, thank you. Andrew Barson?
It's actually a really cool progression, the way that this worked out, because I started as a fan. I was a listener. I started actually with the same thing, Sword Art Online. I had seen this anime that had a video game in it. That was the coolest thing. I was like, that's in a show? That's so cool. So my husband showed it to me, I watched that, and then probably a week later he came in and said, you're not gonna believe what I found. I'm like, what? What'd you find? And he goes, I found a book that's like that. And I was like what? He goes, there's this whole thing, it's called LitRPG. It's like a thing. They write video game books. It's so cool. And I was like, oh, okay. He proceeded, the book he was listening to was Other Life Dreams by William B. Rand and Jeff Hayes. And he literally got a speaker that hooked to one of those resonance speakers that like you could hook to any item and it would make noise, and hooked it to a box and set it in our living room and made me listen with him to Other Life Dreams because he wanted me to hear this amazing voice actor that could do these great female voices and stuff. And I listened to it and I was like, this is so cool. This is what audiobooks are? Because I was like a big memoir type person. I liked, nonfiction and stuff. That's what I listened to up to that point. I was like, people do voices? This is crazy. So I thought it was so cool. And so I'm a natural ham, so I enjoyed it. And my husband befriended William B. Aaron, and then I did the dreaded email to Jeff Hayes. I recorded an audition and sent it to Jeff, and was like, do you think I could do this? Do you think that I have any chance at narration? Do you think I could do it? It's so embarrassing now. And he sent me a very nice email back that was like, I know you're recording on the wrong mic, I know you're using a USB, and I know you're not in a proper environment, but I think you can. And after that, I found Many of Blades. That's why that was so poetic for me, because Many of Blades is my first RPG. And that Matt, when I auditioned, I got a tweet. And I was so nervous, and I had sent off the audition. I got a tweet that just said, saw this great voice actress who sent in an audition for my book, can't wait to work with her. And I went screaming up the stairs, and I ran like, oh my God, the book! I was just yelling down the hallway. I was so excited, and that's rest is history. I just really like the genre. So I listened to all I could, read all I could. It's my life. I love video games.
Yep, and I think that's a very commonality with all of us gamers for life, and it shows in our work. So as LitRPG writers, I know a lot of the members of the panel have not only done LitRPG and GameLit, but also fantasy and science fiction, whether they're narrating or writing. For each one, what do you think are some of the unique aspects of our genre that differentiate or maybe unique challenges compared to science fiction or fantasy? So anything you think is unique to our culture or community?
So one of the things I enjoy in the books that I write, that part of the story takes place in a VR world, is I get to kill off my people and it's not permanent. In your standard fantasy or science fiction book, if somebody dies or dead, everybody's sad. But in a VR game, you can wipe your whole party in ridiculous ways, and they'll come in angry when they come back alive, but you can kill them all. So that makes it more fun for me. I don't know, the readers maybe not, but so there's some flexibility that you have when you're dealing with the game environments, the physics. You can alter physics. You can write people that can jump 20 feet in the air or dodge bullets or whatever. But it's there's more flexibility in it than you would find in your classic fantasy or even some science fiction. That's one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's one of the, I think, defining characteristics of LitRPG that's set in a virtual reality or a game world, and that death is expected. Coming from a gamer culture or a gamer background, you expect to die playing video games. And so that same conceptualization in the story narrative is there. Your characters are expected to grow and progress by dying and learning from their mistakes or leveling up. And maybe their setback is they die and they lose some experience points. That's part of their character progression. But it's kind of a unique thing to video game fiction, because in other genres, in fantasy and science fiction, if you kill off your main character, that kind of ends the series. And it's not the case in LitRPG or GameLit. So, good point. Charles Dean, what are some unique challenges or characteristics of GameLit and LitRPG versus science fiction and fantasy for you?
I'm not going to say it's unique to GameLit, because I feel like fantasy can essentially always be GameLit with just none of the numbers being shown if it's done well. But as a writer, one of the things I love about it is each book can have the expansion packs with video games where you get to have this new concept or new idea roll out, I like the fact that with my books I can have like a new take on philosophy or a new take on like character development in each book and center around another aspect I'm introducing. So like between War Turners 1 and 2, I kind of changed the scenario and changed the way the characters are interacting without, like just by introducing some small tiny mechanics that allowed me to build an entirely new story and new character development for an existing character. So I like the kind of like the expansion pack feel of it when I'm writing it. And I don't know if that's, like I don't want to say that's unique. I've seen fantasy do it too, where you have like, oh, we discovered that we have this power or something, and you're like, oh, that's cool and all. Whereas for me, it's more like, oh, I'm just revealing small, tiny details to the reader slowly throughout the books. And so by the time you get all of this, book 2 comes out and you've got these new details, and it just keeps world building in a way that allows me to develop a story that's entirely different than book 1, because I hate when I read some fantasy books and it's just like, book 1 was book 2, book 3 was book 4, but the name's changed.
Right. Another way is that it's like, oh, this is an update to the server or a patch for the game, and that's another way like, oh, we'll change the rules. And it makes total sense to readers and gamers.
Charles, can you bring your mic a little bit closer? Spring a little closer.
Yes, you have to make sure the mics are close to you.
Good.
Can you hear me better now?
We must hear the great beards.
Must hear the great beards.
Did I repeat anything?
No.
Okay.
It was just quiet.
It's just very quiet.
James
in the same boat.
Go to Crouch. So what are some interesting challenges with GameLit and LitRPG versus fantasy and science fiction?
Well, I will say that you can't get away with anything. So I have the absolute best fans in the world, best fans, and I know that because they will get back to me within an hour of publishing the book with all of the mistakes that I made. So they say, I love your work so much that not only am I going to proofread and find what 3 rounds of editing missed, but I'm going to check your math from book 1 to book 5. And I keep my own sheets, and you're not adding up correctly here in chapter 3, paragraph 6, line 2. And I say, thank you. So, best fans in the world. So it is, like they were saying, you can't, you have to give the numbers, you have to give the peek under the covers, like why you're able to do things, how you can do things. And what's supposed to be happening is that your character can't be a blacksmith who picks up a sword in defense of his home for the first time and kills the King's Legion, because he would die horribly. Your character has to be someone like, hey, I can cast a fireball and I have 38 mana, so I can cast it twice. And if you do it more than that, within 30 seconds of combat, your fans will follow up with you. They'll come to you and say, hey, you did it wrong. And you did, and they will tell you. And that's great, because that means that your fans are extremely invested in what you write, and they will be there and they'll help you to make sure that when other fans come in, they won't find those mistakes anymore. So that's one of those unique challenges for me, is making sure that my math is correct.
No, I've a number of times found math mistakes in LitRPG novels, and it's like, oh, little notes in the author or in the review. Like, oh, the math isn't quite right, or the game mechanics aren't quite consistent because readers want others, because we play video games, and consistency in game mechanics is really important, otherwise the game is not fun. And so we're kind of trained to see those things, or as tabletop player, math is an important part of the experience, like rolling your character, making sure your stats are nice, or min-maxing. And readers and gamers are very particular and vocal about mistakes or things that they aren't fair in these game worlds. So it is very true. Next, Harmon Cooper.
So I experience what Dakota experiences as well. I am bad with numbers, and so if you read my stuff, that's why I edge towards GameLit, because I like the idea of these types of progressions and the idea of like being able to, for example, use like a headset to tag someone and get their basic details. I like those types of things. But to give you an indication of how bad I am at numbers, I just recently published Monster Hunt NYC 3, and about 2 days before I published it, one of my beta readers, Bobby, emailed me and said, hey, your numbers are so far off that like for the whole book you said he received $15 million, but he actually received $150 million. And like, I'm like, and this has been through my editor, my alpha readers, 2 other beta readers who are really, really good. And I'm like, oh my God, I almost posted that book with a discrepancy of, $135 million. And so like, yeah, I'm not so great with those types of numbers. And so I edged away towards those. Some of these guys are super crunchy and they get a lot of, Luke Shimolenko will email me or Facebook message me about some of the messages he gets, exactly what he said, like, well, actually, it would take more than 30 seconds for him to draw this and do this. However, because of a buff from earlier, blah, 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 and he's like, oh no. Like, even 2 years later, he'll say someone emailed me something about book 1 that was like, one number was some percentage off that has now affected the rest of the series. I'm like, so that's really cool. Another challenge is because our readers are playing video games, and they think in terms of video games, they don't understand sometimes, or they do understand, but they don't want to accept the powers of narrative progression. And what I mean by that is they'll do things like, like, why would this character do this? And it's like, well, he has to do that because, like at 70% point in the book, this happens, which means that happens, and that's why this character is introduced in book 2. Like we, as the author, we have like the overall idea of what's happening, right? And so they'll put it in terms of video games, like, well, I would have gone to the right door. And it's like, well, okay, well, then if you'd gone to the right door, or the right door, you would have won the game. And the book is over. And so I've always had this fantasy of publishing a book that's just like, man, it's getting real crunchy, it's really going. And then like, yeah, they just turn off the game and it just ends. And it's like, all right, now I gotta go to 7-Eleven and do my shift. And because of that, because they want to make these decisions that, the author, we're holding all the cards. Sometimes we don't know which cards we're holding, but sometimes we do. And because we're doing that, we're doing things for a reason, right? To create a story, to create dynamics, to create that flow. And sometimes, like, what you would do in a video game would not create that flow. Because, like, I've been playing a lot of Skyrim recently. And, you could just go, you could literally just play that game for, like, 2 years, just going around, killing things, exploring things, making things. And you would never actually really do anything. But you could still have a lot of fun. I mean, that's what I do, like, when my wife watches me play, and she's like, why are you just going around trying to pickpocket people? I'm like, wouldn't you want to do this? Like, so,
mine is, why you always run into a field?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, she had that for Red Dead Redemption. She couldn't understand. I'm like, I gotta rob that person. And I'm from Texas, and I'm like, of course I gotta do it on horseback. And she can't understand this stuff. And she's like, so she'll get so bored, just fall asleep. She's like, you're just going around robbing people. Like, you got 1 hour to play at night, and that's what you do. Well, we couldn't write a book like that. I mean, I guess you could, but then people would be upset because it's like, well, the whole book I read, it took me 10 hours to finish, and you're just going around robbing people. So that's a challenge. On horseback.
I think we notice a lot of comments on like all our readers are really engaged with our story to a greater level than like other genres. Like they'll look at every single game mechanic and give you notes on it all the time. It's not just one person; it's like everybody who's reading your stuff. But it also reflects their investment in your stories, and that's great for sales, and that's great for motivating authors and narrators to continue their work because they know they have an engaged audience. Japanese. So what are any challenges to the genre or unique aspects to it?
Okay, I thought this was an author question, but obviously...
I think the narrator.
Okay.
Challenge for a narrator.
The challenge for the narrator.
Yeah, versus like fantasy or science fiction.
Reading off stats.
Yeah, maybe stats. I don't know. I don't see... Sorry, I don't see any of it as a challenge. I'm having too much fun.
What's unique?
I mean, what's unique about it is... You know what I really love is that you're going to have fantasy characters interacting with gamers in the story. Because the NPCs, they're designed to be like fantasy characters. So they'll be like, hello, adventurer. I have a quest for you. You need to go find my kitty tree. And then the response is like, screw you. Skip, yeah. Why am I talking to this guy? Did you just gank him? There's so much contrast between the actual world that the players are in and the players because the players are coming in from our world, right? And they're in this fantasy. So I think there's a lot of comedy in that, and I think comedy is probably my favorite thing to narrate. My favorite thing to put forward in audiobooks is, you know, comedic timing, great character voices that can make you laugh, but also, you know, they're not just goofy voices, making the voices both relatable and funny, like as if they would be real people that you would know, and as if they would be real gamers that you know. If you ever play games and online and you listen to the crazy shit people talk in video games, you know that there's certain types of players out there. There's certain archetypes out there. Trolls, yes, out there that make gaming what it is, and those gamers show up in these books, and it's so fun to imitate them because it's so fun to listen to them when you're playing video games.
First of all, let me see if I can summarize some of the points that I think you mentioned, that not only are there usual challenges and issues with like narration versus fantasy and science fiction, but there's additional cultural differences in narrating LitRPG and GameLit, in that there's terminology, there are just cultural references that if you're not in the in-group of gamers, you're not going to get. That can be a big hurdle for authors and narrators to overcome it, because they don't even see it. And they just experience it. And you can research your way out of it. You can research it. But you have to be aware that those hurdles exist to create a product that connects with the community and your readers or your listeners.
Right, but for me, it just comes natural. It's like, oh, obviously.
Well, you're super talented, so that doesn't mean you to it. But
it's not about that. It's
also from the perspective of an audio narrator who's not a gamer potentially. Like, these are things that they should be aware of if they want to get into this particular genre. That there are these unique aspects and terminologies that are going to be particular to us, and it's just something to be aware of when you're working, so that your product connects.
Well, definitely, if you're a narrator and you want to get into GameLit or LitRPG, you're gonna have to sink a few hundred hours into actual playing video games if you haven't yet, because it's not just the way the voice actors play it in the video game. It's the culture of gaming that you have to absorb. So.
Yep, and Andrew.
I can think of two big ones right off the top of my head. One, audio community. We have an audio community in GameLit that is like second to none. We have the most voracious, amazing audio listeners, and they are fans not only of the authors, they're fans of us, and that feels so cool because there's people that will interact with us on a personal level on like a regular basis. You know, it's a huge boost as a narrator to have a community that really appreciates what you do, and that's just such a huge part of it, because audio is so important. When someone announces a new release, literally the second comment on the post is, when's the audio? When's the audio coming out? How soon can you get the audio out? It's like immediate, because it's just this voracious group of audio listeners that just love it. The second one that I can think of that's probably like, that I've seen be one of the most important factors is social media. We are all involved. We're all huge on social media in one way or another. We're answering comments on Facebook. I stream my workday every day. Jeff from Sound Booth Theater. All of these guys here can be seen answering constant questions and constant inquiries and constant everything.
And that's only what you see on the, like, we also get the private messages. Like, I'll get fan theories and stuff, I'll read through them all. I'll get ideas from them.
Yep. And those people that will talk to you will then tell their friends, and then they tell their friends, and it's, oh, this person's really nice, you should go pick up their books, you know, they're a really great person, I think they might be good. You know, it's such a tight-knit and intense fandom. You know, it's so intense and supportive that it makes a really unique environment for all of us that I think is a lot of fun to exist in, because it's a little biome of our own.
Right, that's an interesting point. What was that? You have a question?
No, I wanted to say something. So for the narrators, like a lot of the narrators here obviously are not part of our community. So I'm just wondering, like, have any of you heard of me, like Dakota Crowd, as a writer, like as for the narrators that aren't, well, not you. No, okay, so
count.
so something to think of, like, because the point of this, what she's saying, is we have such a tight community. Like, my audiobooks have over, like, my top audiobook has over 10,000 reviews on it, right? Like, and at least half of those are like, oh man, we love that narrator. Who else in the genre has this narrator? Like, we love this, we love your books, but these narrators are great. Like, where else can we find them? And so it's a great boost to narrators coming in as well. Like, if you're trying to get noticed or trying to gather your own following and bring that along with you. I mean, not all of us can be R.C. Gray.
I think, Andrea, if you could touch on my next question. What about, if somebody asks you for advice, how can I get into GameLit, LitRPG, another author or narrator, what would be like your advice to help them to be successful in doing this kind of stuff? Start with Dave.
Yeah, I'm a terrible person to get advice from, so I was thinking about asking me a question, just don't. The first and most important for our genre is to know what you're talking about, know the games, know the history, know the references. There's no shortcut to learning the tropes, there's no faking it. You gotta put in the time and learn to write the game that the readers are gonna wanna play. And then the second thing is just do it. Just don't think about it. Just sit down in front of your laptop or your notebook if you're one of those ancient types that hand writes everything out before you write it. But just sit down and do it, and don't stop doing it until your book is done. And then do it again because you probably screwed up something in there somewhere, and you're writing back, and your editors will slam you. So, but yeah, just sit down, decide you're going to do it, set aside whatever time you need every day, and just do it.
Thank you very much, Charles.
I think I'm probably the worst person to ask advice for, because I generally get annoyed with people who do it.
Why did I even invite you guys?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things Dave touched on is...
I don't know what you expected.
They're all looking up to you right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But so one of the things that Dave touched on is you have to sink the time in. You have to be a LitRPG person before you're going to be able to write it. And I can't tell you the number of times somebody comes up to me and they're like, "Oh, how do I write your genre?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, what's the last video game you played?" And then they'll be like, "Oh, well, I remember playing this game in early 2000s." And I'm like, "Then don't write LitRPG." Like, I don't know what to tell you at this point. Or if you are dead set on it, go to the store, pick up an MMO, pick up some video games. Note the things that you find funny, note the things that you liked about the video game, because chances are, if you're writing to the genre and you're writing about things you like, most of the time, other people note these things too. Like, we all have these memes, like hundreds of memes about like video games, like the guy who gets drunk and then 60 seconds later he's sober, and we all kind of find this funny. And if you put these type of things into books and you actually love the game and you love the memes and stuff, it will show in your writing and it'll be great. But then if you just come to some random guy who's already been doing it for a while and you're like, "Oh, how do I get the cheat sheet to kind of do it without having to work?" then it's not going to work. And so that's why I'm generally a bad person to ask for advice, because I'll just tell you to go put in the legwork, go play the games, go join the community, talk to the people, read the books, and that's how you start.
Thank you very much. Dakota, any advice for people who want to succeed in our genre?
We were talking about Game Genie, and because it's like, yeah, here's your cheat sheet. So I immediately thought, hey, what about Game Genie? You guys remember that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I would say for people that are trying to be successful in our genre, a lot of what we do, yes, as authors, is write, and that is what is making us, money and successful. But the thing that makes us truly successful is the interaction that we have with our fans, with our communities. So we have these massive profiles on Facebook, on Instagram, on Reddit, on everywhere that we can be. We have a presence. Some of us. We have a fan base. Let's just leave it like that. We have a fan base that we interact with fairly regularly. People that talk to us and we talk back. What we have is not a model where we we can hand our books to someone else and say, I did it. You know, like that's the start. You know, like writing a book is the start for us. So you have to really know what you're trying to do. Like they said, is you have to know the book, but you also have to know the market. You have to reach out and say, hey, fans, people that interact with me and want to read my stuff, how do I get to what you want to read? And it's a fine balance between asking and having that expectation. So you have to write what you want to write, of course, because you're writing it. But if no one reads it, it's not going to do well, obviously.
Okay, thank you. Harmon Cooper, any advice for people who want to succeed in this?
Well, I would say that you still can. There's a lot of people in the genre who will say that it's just to stop. And I think that's why the genre keeps growing, is because people don't stop. And every year there's a new author that comes out and I'm like, holy hell, who is this person? Like, they're outranking me. And we track all these things, we know all these things, and like we all know where we are. It's unpleasant. I don't actually like that part about it, actually. But it is the GameLit aspect of life the philosophy I was getting back to, and or to speaking of earlier. So you can still do it. There is competition, of course, and you have to know what you're doing. And you should have probably read at least a LitRPG book, or at least read Lit 1 or something, just to at least understand, how it could happen. And I'm not saying that's LitRPG because there's going to be people blowing me up if I do, including Ramon. So I'm joking. But yeah, it's you have to. First of all, that's what I really I have to give Dave a compliment here. That's what I really like about Dave, is because he just kind of came out of nowhere and he had read like everyone's books, and I was like, well, this dude had read. Not only is he like writing and publishing and doing well, but he like knows all the references. He's in my Facebook authors group.
He gave you the big chalupa.
He gave me my first nickname. I have a new one.
Oh, really? What's the new one?
The Merry Fixer of GameLit.
The Merry Fixer
of GameLit. Yeah. I re-christened myself after the big blowout recently.
Thick butt.
Yeah. But yeah, he's a prime example of that. For those of you who are like, oh man, there's all these other authors saying it's too bloated, blah blah blah. I mean, like there have been people that have been telling me it's too bloated since 2016, and like look at the amount of success people have had since 2016 in this genre. And so it is true that there's a lot of people, there's a lot of fish in the pool. But I mean, if you do well, if you know how to market yourself and you're able to spark that interest, then you'll catch the attention of the right people. And this is one of the right people, but there's a lot of right people, and they'll read your stuff and they'll review it and they'll tell others about it. But there is no, a few people in the genre have instant success. That has never been me. As I said, I've been publishing for a very long time in terms of like self-publishing. And some people have had that first book and they're already in the top 100. But the majority of people are not like that, so gauge your expectation levels. Even if you're in the top 1,000, you're in the top 1,000 of 3 million books. So there's people that's like, top 1,000, it's over. I got to go back to working at Walmart. And it's like, oh, you've really done really, really well at this point. So I would say gauge your expectations and write what you're passionate about. And he wants to say, and make sure you give this man your hat if you ever see him. A lot of hats now. You get a lot of hats.
Thank you very much. And James.
Yeah. So I suppose I can just flip it over to the narrator's point of view, but I think it's the same answer. Stay indie, be in the community, and pay attention to what people like and what they want. Be accessible. Talk to your listeners. Be friends with them. Be a part of the author community. They all talk to each other. They all tell each other, how well or poorly they're treated by you, and watch what you're doing. Be a partner. Be a partner with your authors. Really, like it goes a long way. And I don't think that this is exclusive to GameLit or LitRPG. That attitude. I think that can also be successful in other genres, as long as you can find a community where everyone is gathering. around. Yeah, that's the hard part of other genres, because most of those people who read those other genres are used to going through, finding their books through more traditional means. There's more publisher backing, so they just, they find their books that way, and the GameLit people, they're always on the internet. The LitRPG people are always talking to each other on the internet. It's just kind of how internet and gaming goes hand in hand. So that's the place that you need to be with all those people who are listening, have your voice in their ears for hours on end. Those are the people you need to make a connection with. I think that's about all I have for
And
remote.
No, that's actually a really good point.
And remote, yes.
Jeff Pace's comment, like being involved in the community, is like, as a reader or as a listener, you're more likely to try your friend's work than you are to a total strangers, and that's kind of what it comes down to as far as this small, kind of close-knit community. When you're a part of it, people are more likely to give you a chance than if like some random stranger dropping their link in your Facebook feed that you don't know. That's kind of what it comes down to for a lot of readers.
I want just real quick at what Harmon said, that yes, we are gamers and we're competitive and we track each other's stats. We all do it, but we also support each other at the same time. We promote each other's books. We talk offline, alpha read and beta read for each other, offer suggestions. We're competitive, but we're also friends, and we spend a lot of time helping each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a writer, but most people listen to podcasts would never know that because I spend 99% of my time promoting other people's work because I love the genre. I love these guys. I love the community of authors and narrators and readers more than I love paying my bills, I guess. And before we do our last answer, if anybody has any questions, come up to the microphones again, queue up, and after we answer that last one, then we'll go to questions and answers. So Andrew, do you have any suggestions for success in the genre?
One of the biggest ones I can think of is, other than play games, other than being just play games. If you can do that, you're ahead by a huge amount. But other than that, like legitimately, from the bottom of my very soul, commit and have fun, because that's what people want to hear in the genre. They want to hear you have fun with the words. They want to hear you dance on the canvas. They want you to sing. And they expect a performance in these books. They expect somebody who wants to bring this book to life, because that's what these things are normally. They're on a screen in front of you. And if you can paint those words, if you can make this into that screen, you're going to be able to be successful in it. If you can have fun, if you can do it and commit to it and do stuff that you wouldn't be willing to risk otherwise. Make the big scary voices, for Christ's sake. Who cares? They're great. People love it, If you can commit to those choices and stuff, that's my biggest advice for narrators, because it's just have fun with it, because it will come across, and that's what everyone in the RPG wants anyways. They're there for fun.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that answer. Charles, you had another statement?
I'm just going to double down on what Dave said for a second, but when I was talking about you have to play the games and everything, and he was saying, oh, well, the market was bloated in 2016, it's bloated in 2017, it's bloated in 2018. I think a lot of I remember watching Chris Jones, I can't say his last name ever, I'm sorry. Chris released a book, and he was just this no-name guy out of nowhere. He released a book earlier, I guess last year, or late last year, or early this year was when it had tracked, and it did incredibly well, because not only did he put in the effort to play the games and know all the memes, but he kind of he was part of the, I'm going to call it cults, because that's what GameLit and LitRPG feels like to a degree, but he was part of the cults in which everyone in the community that I've talked to, from the authors to the readers to the random people in the Facebook group that you're not sure how they got there, because they're like, I read 4 books, but I love this community. They all started roughly the same, and they all were like, I just, wanted to hop in and have friends. They wanted to have a community because a lot of these people don't have it. I didn't have friends before the LitRPG. I was like stuck in a base in the middle of nowhere, the only male civilian there. So I had no friends. At LitRPG was that. And so it's never too late to pick up a game, become a gamer, and join the genre. Like the genre will open arms, welcome literally anyone at any time. So where it's not too late, you can join it. You just got to be willing to accept everything.
Absolutely, we're a very welcoming community, LitRPG and game in general. So questions from the audience. We're going to start with
Hi, Kendra here. Hello.
There you go.
There.
Good to speak a little
Hi. I former employee at 2K, so I have an understanding of the visual aspect of gaming, but I do plead my naivete with the LitRPG. As an actor and potential narrator in this genre, my questions are, how do you maintain the character arc in a situation where you may have someone who's pickpocketing for whatever percentage of the storyline, or they haven't done this to level up? You know, where do you find those spaces as narrators that you get to keep building that persona? And also my second question would be, is there a difference in receptivity in narrations by single narrators versus dual or multipath narrations?
Actually, we're both on this.
we have a question for our narrators, Jeff Ace and Russell.
Okay, so maintaining a story arc for a character like that, a specific example like that, you have to put yourself in the shoes of a gamer doing that, not the character that's in the world, right? That's an actual thief. This is a person who doesn't know anything about stealing, and the game is allowing them to steal because of numbers, and so they're having fun leveling up their skill. They don't know anything about stealing, so you have to put yourself in that mindset rather than being the clever rogue.
Yes, that is true. That's a big component of it, because it's the arc isn't necessarily in that character that's being played by the gamer. The arc may be in that gamer's growth, that person outside of the game, what they've done, what they've experienced, because they may be playing the same game. They may be just going into that game and stealing crap, and that's all they do all day because that's their escape. But they have a whole life outside of that, and they're dealing with their own stuff, and that's remembering that there's a person inside that player, I think, or a person inside that character. It's
an extra layer. It's just an extra layer of stuff. Like the thief aspect is a facade.
And her second question was, what is the receptivity of single versus multi-narrative audiobooks?
Okay, so one great thing about, I think, the GameLit and LitRPG community is a lot of people who are reading and listening in this community are new to reading and listening to audiobooks. So they don't have a lot of expectations. So really the receptivity is just fine as long as both the narrators are good. I started hiring female actresses because I just wanted the audiobooks to sound better. And as much as people think that my female voices sound good, they don't sound as good as Annie. So, and the cool thing is, once you start bringing in other narrators, once you start making partnerships within the actual audiobook, that's more stuff to talk about. You know, that word of mouth is the most powerful marketing possible, and there's not going to be word of mouth if there's not a whole lot to talk about. Yeah, the narrator did well. Anyway, the story is this, it's great, and the narrator's good too. Well, if you're interacting with another narrator and they have two narrators to compare against each other, and it's just value added in this genre to have dual narration.
Thank you. Andrew, anything to add?
Yeah, I actually like the unique aspects of both sides of it. I enjoy both sides of it because I work with sound booth as well as one of their voices, and then I do single on my own, and I like both sides. I like the elements, because I think they exist in their own little microcosms. Like the sound booth is so much like an audio drama. It's a whole experience. There's music and effects, and it's a whole different thing. And sound booth is a party. With me, it's a one-on-one dance, you know? And they're both fun. They're both dances, and you both have a great time. You know, it's just unique viewpoints on it. And they are both successful in the genre. Neither one is necessarily like hugely more successful than the other one. Sound booth is amazing, so that's its own thing. Like Jeff's a juggernaut, so that sound booth is its own deal. But as far as just, you know, on the bare bones, like speaking narrator stats wise, or like single narrator work is great in it. So
we have time for one more question before we wrap up. So you're our man.
Can we get an extra 5 minutes? Is that possible?
I feel bad. I'm the only person.
I can't. Is there anybody that can answer that question?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Awesome. What's your question, sir?
So real quick, thank you for all the information you've given us about all this stuff. I'm more curious about the sound editing side. Do you guys work with companies for sound editing, or do you find your own sound editors? How does that work out?
So the question for the audience, if you can do they find their own sound editors, or do they own editing, sound editing, so the narrators can?
Yeah, so when I first started doing audiobook narration, I did all my own sound engineering, I did all my own proofing. And I think that's really a good thing to start with as a narrator. You should know how to use all the tools. You should know how to use EQ and how to pick out terrible mouth sounds. And because number one, you're listening to yourself perform, and you will get better that way because you will suck at first and you will hate yourself for it. And so in order to do that to do less sucking and less hating yourself, you just have to know specifically what you're doing wrong. And the only way to do that is to listen. But also, when you suck and you know that you're going to keep sucking in certain ways, you have to know that when it comes to hiring a producer later. So now I have a few proofers and engineers working for Sound Booth Theater, and they all have their own strengths and they all have their own work, you know, their own ways of working, and so you have to. It's just learning how to work with those people is important. But
Right.
a narrator who understands sound is much better.
I think at some point it's just more efficient to outsource editing.
Eventually, if you're successful, you just don't have time.
Yeah.
I will say that from our side of things, like as a publisher, a lot of the time what we do is we hire on a narrator for a series or for how long we can. And a good chunk of the time they will either say like, yes, we have our own stuff, but we also do work with another company that does just audio engineering. So there's a good chunk of time where, especially if we're like, hey, we need this book out, so we want book 1, we want book 2, we want book 3, just go. And let's say just give us the raw files, we'll work with our audio engineers. So audio company, publishing.
Because they're speaking from a publishing perspective there as well, not just a narration. Anything you want to add to that question?
Yeah.
No? Okay.
From an individual perspective,
Thank you very much. Next question over here.
Hello. Hi. A quick question for Charles. My grandma keeps asking when she can get a physical copy of your book, so.
We got a spotlight.
I guess I should have a physical copy of my book, but I don't want to have like a permanent record of my mistakes, so I'm always like a little bit careful. I'm like, one of the things they mentioned was that you can have multiple passes of editors and then a beta reader will catch something. And while I haven't had my numbers caught, I have had somebody be like, hey, did you see that you totally put a space between the T and the H and the word the on page 297? And I'm like, thank you. Yeah, now it became T instead of the. Like, okay.
Answer the question. When will you
Answer the question, Charles.
I thought the answer was, I'm too scared.
Interesting factor though, that is, like, physical copies are rare in LitRPG, but they're really demanded.
Yeah, some fans really love them.
I guess next month is, because we've already got the covers, so we should be at like 6 or 7 books come out this month.
So I get a feeling you're going to keep hearing this question until you deliver that book.
Okay, so hopefully by August.
We'll hold you to that.
Yeah.
And for Jeff and Andrea, can you think of a game that, like an actual video game that wasn't voice acted, that you would like to have voice acting in, and/or a game that you would have already been out and that you would like to do voice acting in?
Okay, so I would say Fallout, the original Fallout.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Andrew, any video games that didn't have voice acting that you would like to see get voice acting, perhaps?
Such a person for voice acting in games. I'm trying to think, the last game that I played didn't have voice acting.
Even like a really old one. Like,
I'm trying to think of a really old one.
Super Mario Brothers.
Oregon Trail. I like the voice of Oregon Trail.
Oregon Trail. Like all of like coding, like Pandemonium, something with all voice acting to a limited extent. So yeah, to a limited extent. Yeah. So I feel like I can't say it because they do have voice acting in them. So I feel dishonest. But what I love to do, like an RPG, like I love the full.
Spell RPG as a genre.
I'd like to hear you do commentary on Frog and just the cuss words you come up with.
Thank you very much for your question. And on this side, what's your question, sir?
For the authors, and specifically the ones that like to play like D20 RPGs or tabletop RPGs, my favorite thing is the sadism of the DM versus the players. Without players, like what's the balance there? How do you still feel like you incorporate a little bit of that?
We try to torture the readers in place of the players. Just oh, you like this character? Thank you.
That's absolutely true. Yes.
That's
I tabletop with Charles on D20 many times, and he's murderous as a DM. Any other DMs want to speak to that? To put it?
Yeah, so I would say that the benefit of having characters that can respawn is that we, like they said earlier, we can kill them in new and interesting ways all the time. So, it could be anything from, you open a door and a big giant fluffy teddy bear squeezes you, and just keeps you there until you suffocate. Or it could be, just simple pitfall trap. Things like you're like, oh man, this is so low level that it shouldn't. Just all this stuff it's funny to have like main huge level character. I have level 99. Walking through and he's like listening muscles and just falls in a pitfall trap and dies because it's 10 feet down and he can only fall 9 feet without true damage. And it's like.
And remember that one of the Code's main series is a dungeon core novel, which means the story is told from the dungeon's perspective, and whose job it is to murder adventurers and as they try to traverse and get treasures and levels and stuff. So he's definitely a murder hobo. Any other answers to those that question?
It's interesting from a DM perspective as a narrator because it's got DM games at a table before and telling somebody else's story. It's a lot like telling a module, but you get to do it from a standpoint of like it's the most intense way to do it. I feel like it's more intense than even playing with like other players in front of me was because you're sitting there with a microphone and trying to make that story pop off that page and off the earphones, in the same way you would do it while looking at somebody's face, And so that part of it is really intense, and I like that part of it. That's a huge, fun thing to do, and it's fun to be like have DM background because it really does echo over there.
I think so. There are definitely lots of DMs who've written stuff, and you can definitely see the influence. Like, oh, it's probably a real player's. From their DM game, from their response and their character creation thing.
Keep in mind, another thing is I do still roll to see what happens.
Yeah.
Yes. All of my skill levels, every skill level is all that does is add a percentage to my roll. So if I get a 1, but I have like 100% skill, I get a 2 instead of critically failing, right? And just stuff like that. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, some authors were definitely murder of characters because they had a bad role when they were writing it.
Right. Yeah, that's
and you can't because they didn't have it back up.
it's terrible when you write a book and you're like, players are like, oh, Charles, are you going to kill me in this way this week? And I'm like,
probably.
Yeah.
I feel like that too. One thing for narrators who maybe are trying to jump in on it and see what it feels like, I would recommend 2 different podcasts. I really am a big fan. Maybe somebody's listened to it, of my brother and me, and their podcast, The Adventure Zone. That is really, really cool, and it allows you to like see that interaction. And so if it doesn't make sense yet, reading how a lit RPG or GameLit would read or how it would be delivered, seeing it in that environment with a father playing with his sons, and one of the sons is a DM, and does music and stuff, so it gives you that full effect. Also, I think it's Authors and Dragons.
And that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, Authors and Dragons, Drew Hayes, Robert Bevan, there's a couple other dudes in there.
Yeah.
And they get together, do a podcast and play a game, and I think that for people, especially maybe if you're really too busy to sit around and play games, you got kids and stuff, and it's like, for me personally, I only have from 9:30 or about 10 to 11 to play video games if I'm going to play video games. So, but during the day, if I'm busy, if I'm going around, if I'm exercising, those types of things, being able to listen to those things and audiobooks at the same time will help augment that knowledge too.
Yeah.
I have that critical role. From a voice actor standpoint, critical role has to be on that list too.
Right, that's written by Robert Bevan, who's in that podcast, Authors, yes, where they do a podcast version of their game session for their tabletop game, which is really fun. It's because they're all comedy authors. Drew Hayes, Robert Bevan, and some other great authors, so definitely check that out. Thank you for
just one more thing relative to your question. We know our audience are gamers, and they're sick as we are when it comes to this. So we can do things, and most of us up here, probably all of us up here have done this. We can do things like send a noob out and get killed by fluffy bunnies, and we know that outsiders are thinking, man, that's sick, and everybody else is going, yeah. So we can do things as the GM in the story that, for maybe some humor, that we know our people are going to laugh at.
Oh yeah, tons of things like jokes. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for your question, sir. Questions from the audience on the live stream?
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, do we have time? Do we have time for?
Are we okay to continue?
It's one quick question and one that might need a little more answer.
Okay, so my name is Augustus Blackmer, and I'm going to ask some questions from Andrew Drake Kinley. And that question is, I want to know Andrea's favorite character she's performed.
Oh, don't stop.
Pick a job.
Spotlight.
It's such a rough question because I feel like I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings no matter what. But I every Popper.
And
that character is the best thing ever. Like, I just love that character so much, and I love all my characters. Please, nobody be hurt by that. But it's just Popper's near and dear to my heart. He was my first really strong decision. So, he was my first really big decision in a book, and I was proud of him.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question.
Okay, and this is Drew Stofferman. I'm sorry if I butchered that. As the GameLit RPG community evolves, do you see rotating or keeping editors, formatters, and alpha/beta readers important to your live plans?
Okay, do you see keeping editors and other production assistants side?
I mean, until AI can do it, which I still wouldn't trust AI to do it, yeah.
Wait, does this person mean keeping the same editors? I'm confused.
So it's rotating them or keeping the same ones?
I think
there's a lot of variables there. The availability of the editors, the timing your books are finished, the skill level of the editors, the finished product that you get. I don't think there's a single answer to that.
Yeah, I think it's also perspective as a single author or a publishing company.
I will say this: when we find editors that we like and that can do the work and do it consistently and do it well, then we definitely are going to want to keep them on. So we have great editors. I'm sure all of us do. We have people that we trust to do our books. Sometimes they can't take on the project at the time, and that's when. That's unfortunate. Sometimes it just happens with everything, like arts, editing, whatever it is. Sometimes you have to get someone new, but it's always a huge trial to find someone that you trust with your, the last 2 to 3 months of your life. Because that's what it was. And you say, here you go, make this pretty enough that I don't have too many fans coming back to me with things that you missed, because that's always nerve-wracking.
That's all I mentioned.
I got one more, and this is from Truffle Lorenzo, and he wanted me to ask Jeff about reading the Space Raptors book.
Yes.
First of all, Space Raptor Bud Invasion is not a LitRPG.
So just to explain a little bit to the audience, Jeff Hayes does Sound of Theater, where he reads novels on YouTube and on Facebook live for the audience. So just take selections of stuff and do some very great narration. But one of the common requests is to do this book. What's it called again?
Space Raptor Bud Invasion by Chuck Tingle.
It's part of cringe theater. Yeah, like that's a special segment on.
Yeah, very special.
Yeah.
Very special request on a very special segment of the show. Space Raptor Bud Invasion was that was the birth of the gentleman with the silver voice. And yeah, so it was, it's just about a guy on the moon, and he gets visited by a raptor, and they start getting along pretty well.
You can all enjoy it on YouTube and
yes, please
find it for yourselves.
Look up
special.
Look up Sound of Theater live on YouTube. We have subscribed to our channel, and there's a ton of horrible things that I say on my show. Yes. Chuck Tingle is the author of that, and I think
that's it. I think
we're out of time. Okay, guys, thank you so
very
much.
Jeff Hayes and Andrew Harson.
Yes,
Thank you everybody for also joining.
Thank you for hosting, Ramona, and everybody. Don't forget to join us Saturday or tonight at Saturday. What time is it? Anyone knows what time audio tonight is?
I think it starts at 8:15.
8:15. We'll be. I think we're the last group to do a skit on Saturday night, and that will be LitRPG.
Yeah, it's a really good glimpse into it. So yeah.
Written by Dave Fuller.
Yes. And where is that being performed at? No?
Yeah.
Where is
Neil Helliger is also
Where
this.
is it?
It's at Bragg. Yeah.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the panel.
Turn